Hello and welcome to the podcast. This is Ron's Amazing Stories. We have stories that should thrill you a little and chill you a little.
It's amazing.
What you'll hear are adventures sent in by you guys, classic stories from the pulp mags, and episodes from the golden age of radio. We have special segments like Ghost Stories with Sylvia.
That's amazing.
And These Are Your Stories. So settle in for the next hour and enjoy the show. One more thing. You just might want to prepare yourself to be taken away from today.
Another 5-minute mystery.
This 5-minute mystery is being brought to you by These Are Your Stories.
Ron, you're spamming that again.
I am, but today we're doing something totally new.
New?
Yes, we are debuting These Are Your Stories Special Edition.
Oh, how exciting.
You have no idea.
Well, Inspector, how are things progressing on the Stats case? The missing woman been located yet?
No, I'm afraid not, O'Malley. Not a sign since she disappeared last Tuesday night.
How's the husband taking it?
As well as can be expected. He's got several thousand set up for ransom just in case. I'll get it. Inspector Fitzmaurice speaking.
Inspector, this is Howard Stats. Could you come over right away? It's very important.
What is it?
A big box just arrived at my house, not over 15 minutes ago. It's supposed to be some fishing tackle I had stored up for the winter.
Well, what about it?
Inspector, it's not the fishing tackle. It's too heavy. I haven't had nerve enough to open it, but I think it might be a body.
Yeah, let's turn this end up. From the Caldwell Storage Company, Midville, PA, first class special.
I didn't want to open it, Inspector, until you arrived.
How long ago did you say this arrived?
About 6. My sister Abby received it.
But I didn't think of its being anything but Howard's fishing equipment until the man who brought it in said something about its being mighty heavy.
I hope I'm wrong, Inspector, but something told me to expect the worst.
I'll soon find out. Really wrapped up tight. Now, to break these flaps. Let's see. Holy mackerel.
It's Claire.
Good heavens. I knew it. I knew those devils would try something like this.
Oh, I can't bear it. I can't.
Mr. Stats, are you expecting this box from the storage company?
Yes, I was. I usually have my fishing equipment stored up for the winter. I wrote them a few days ago.
Oh, don't you see, Inspector? Whoever killed Claire must have known about Howard's expecting this package. They hoped he'd just put it away in the basement, maybe, and not ever thinking...
Yes, I'm afraid it wouldn't have looked so good for you, Mr. Stats.
How long do you think she was dead, Inspector?
The coroner will have to set that, but I'm afraid she didn't have a chance.
You mean she's been dead since Tuesday? Since she disappeared?
That's the way it looks to me.
But if anyone wanted her money, they wouldn't have to kill her. Why didn't they just ask for a ransom?
Maybe this party was the one party that couldn't get a ransom.
Why, what do you mean by that, Inspector? I'd have paid anything to get Claire back safely. Anything.
But you couldn't pay yourself ransom, Mr. Stats. Nor could your sister, for that matter.
Why, what are you driving at, Inspector?
Just this, Mr. Stats. I'm holding you and your sister for the murder of your wife.
Why did the inspector arrest these two for murder? You know the clue? In a moment we'll hear, but first...
That is a puzzle. How did he know?
Too many gaps, and add to the fact that it was made in the 40s. It's hard to tell what was common knowledge and how things have changed today.
So what you're saying is, you're stumped.
Harsh, but that does adequately describe my situation.
And you admit it?
It depresses me. I think I will go see my psychiatrist.
Let me know how that goes.
It warms my heart that you care.
Oh, I don't care. I'm just filling this time up.
Wrong. You're amazing.
I am, aren't I?
And now, back to our story.
Why, this is outrageous. You can't prove a thing.
Oh, can't I? You did a nice job of fixing up that package to make it look like a first-class special parcel. But that package never even went through the mails. It was here in this house all the time, waiting for you to spring it. It may interest you, too, to know that the United States Post Office will not accept first-class packages weighing over 70 pounds. It's pretty obvious that any human body crated up tips the scales way over that.
Okay, but what if she only weighed 40 pounds?
That is a very good point.
Yes, it is. So, how did your doctor visit go?
I told him that I was down and that everyone seems to hate me.
Oh? What did he say about that?
He told me I was being ridiculous. Not everyone has met me yet.
Is that you said?
Hello, and welcome to the podcast. We have a pretty special show today with all new content, including a new segment. We also have a classic science fiction story titled, I Like Martian Music. And we have 3 brand new stories sent in by you, and they're all from Canada. But before we get to any of that, I want to talk to you about some changes that are coming to Ron's Amazing Stories, and I think you're going to like them. First off, These Are Your Stories are going to go through some changes. I think that if you've been following the show, you've been kind of expecting it for a while. Now, what are these changes? Well, let's start with the most obvious. The blog version is going to be changing its name. It gets a bit confusing when the blog name is the same as the podcast segment name, so I'm dropping it, and this is the last week we will be using These Are Your Stories. Now, I'm actually not going to rename it, but I will continue to put your stories in written format on the blog. I probably will just title it Whatever You Do. So it isn't really a change at all as much as an improvement. Secondly, I'm introducing a brand new These Are Your Stories, if things weren't confusing enough already. And this one's going to be called These Are Your Stories Special Edition. I'm going to talk more about this one in a minute, so hang in there. Lastly, These Are Your Stories is going to become its own podcast. This is a huge change, and it probably isn't going to happen until April or early March timeframe. I've learned a lot about making a podcast, and this time when I do it, I'm going to do it right with some protections to make the podcast both copyrighted and trademarked right out of the gate. Something I wish I would have spent a whole lot more time on when I created Ron's Amazing Stories. Now, I don't want you to worry about this podcast. The RAS is going to continue on like it always has, with These Are Your Stories being replaced by a new segment that I think you're going to find absolutely amazing. So after all of that, are you ready to hear the first installment of These Are Your Stories Special Edition?
Yeah!
Let's do it.
These are your stories. Special Edition.
Welcome to These Are Your Stories. You might be asking, how is this different from the other segment? The answer is simple. These are special. But what makes them that way? Again, the answer is simple. They deserve special treatment. It may be the content of the story or how the story was obtained. Or it could be that the storyteller himself or herself is actually here in person. No matter the how, why, or where, what you'll hear in this segment is gonna be special. So let's get to our first edition of These Are Your Stories Special. Our story today comes from my home state of Washington. Orrin Williams is a longtime resident of Amboy. The population there is 1,838 at the 2020 census. It is located 33 miles northeast of Vancouver, which is my hometown. We met in the 1990s when I would go on Bigfoot hunts on the weekends. These hunts would consist of night excursions into the Gifford-Pinchot National Forest, the home to many Bigfoot sightings and strange reports, including UFO encounters. Orrin found out about my podcast and contacted me. He said that he had a heck of a story to share, but didn't think he could write it. I set up a time and Orrin and I chatted on the phone. I took notes, wrote the story, and sent it off to him for approval, which he gave. The story you are about to hear is the result. You might want to hold on to your seat. This is one whale of a ride. Orrin has titled his story, Bigfoot from Space. I've always chased after Bigfoot. Ever since I was about 8 years old, I have collected every news article, picture, and video I could find. Since I am from Amboy, and it is called Bigfoot Central, this was not too hard. By my 19th birthday, I had the biggest collection of evidence in the area. I had been on more hunts and seen the big guy more than anyone. By my 25th birthday, I led expeditions into the forest. These were hit or miss, mostly miss, so I ended doing these in 2002. But I never stopped chasing after him. This story is from one of those encounters. I have more questions than answers, and I really can't be sure of all that happened, but I will report the facts as they occurred. It had been a while since I had been out. We were having some exceptionally clear weather in October of 2009. I grabbed my friend, we'll call him Jim, and went out to an area just south of Yakult, which is only about 5 miles from Amboy. We set up camp and built a standard Bigfoot blind. Think deer blind, but a bit more sturdy. They can throw rocks, you know. We were all set up and had listening gear running to capture all the sounds of the forest. We'd also placed a few motion sensor cameras in the area. Never caught Bigfoot on one, but the things they do capture are pretty amazing. We once caught a cougar in stop motion taking out a deer. Pretty gruesome. It was about 2 a.m. when we heard a whirling sound coming from the east. It was not like anything I'd ever heard before, and it was followed by some strange lights in the sky. They kind of reminded me of the powerful searchlights like you used to see in the city marking some special event. It was obvious that someone was looking for something. I thought maybe the rangers were out searching for a lost hiker. That happens all the time around here. Jim and I decided to leave the blind to go see what was going on. So we headed towards the lights. When we got there, they just blinked out, and the constant whirling sound also stopped. The silence was deafening, and we both admitted that we felt chills go through our bodies. It was then we heard the scream. Of course, I've heard this sound before, and there was no doubt that it was Bigfoot. Once you hear that scream, you know it for the rest of your life. Less than a minute later, another scream rang out in answer to the first. This one from the west, probably near our camp. Jim looked at me and said, "Dang, Orrin, we better get out of here." I agree, and we slowly started heading west. We had gotten about 100 yards, and the lights flashed back on, and the whirling sound resumed. I swear I had never been so scared. We were getting close to camp when I heard this crash to my right. I pointed my flashlight and caught a large rock roll into view. A second later, a second rock landed close by. We picked up our pace, and within a short time we were back at the blind. What we found, I will never forget. The entire camp had been destroyed. We took this as a sign, and we made a beeline to Jim's truck. We were driving away, and I happened to look out the back window. Standing there, in the middle of the road, was Bigfoot. He stood about 12 feet tall, covered head to toe in fur, and was holding an impossibly large rock in his hand. As we were making our getaway, we came to an area that had been clear-cut. This gave me a pretty good view of the sky. What I saw was 3 balls of light floating above the forest. They were moving in perfect unison, and I swear it was in some kind of search pattern. What they were looking for, I have no idea. The next day, Jim and I went back to get our gear. I remember thinking how very different things looked in the daylight. However, the camp was still just smashed. We took everything that was still good, and the rest was loaded into Jim's truck for a dump run. The recorder was smashed, and somehow, I don't understand, but the memory card was missing. We recovered the cameras, and of course, they had captured absolutely nothing. So we had no proof of anything we heard or saw. Right after this, I decided to get my very first cell phone so that I could have a backup. Orrin Williams, Amboy, Washington. Well, that is Orrin's story. I've not heard anything like it before, and I'm guessing neither have you. There is a new theory about Bigfoot. Some say that he is a star-faring race, which does explain why he's so elusive. Others say that he might be an interdimensional traveler. I have no answers, and I bet if you ask Orrin, he doesn't either. I do know this. This was an amazing story and is well deserving of These Are Your Stories special treatment. Thank you, Orrin. Today's podcast is brought to you by Audible. Get a free audiobook and a 30-day free trial at audibletrial.com/Ron's Amazing Stories. They have over 180,000 titles to choose from for your iPhone, Android, computer, Kindle, whatever you have, you probably can listen to Audible on it. So what am I listening to right now? The Singularity Trap by Dennis E. Taylor. It's brought to life by the award-winning narrator, Ray Porter. The Singularity Trap is a thrilling adventure full of drama and action on a truly cosmic scale. Ivan Pritchard was determined to give his wife and children a better life back home. He ventures to the edge of known space to join the crew of the Mad Astra as an asteroid miner. Here is a sample from the book.
1 minute to launch. Ivan gripped the chair arms even tighter. The pain in his fingers penetrated his panic, and he struggled to unclench his hands and slow his breathing. He looked at the arms of his blue coverall, relieved that the cloth was still dry. If he couldn't get a grip soon, the sight of a sopping wet uniform would only encourage the other crew members to more of what they apparently thought was witty commentary. And anyway, his funk made no logical sense. The sling had been launching shuttles into orbit with no major incidents for almost 40 years. Technically, this was safer than air travel. And he was going into space. This should be fun. Hey, noob. You aren't going to have a jammer, are you? Ivan glanced to his left at Tennyson Davies, sitting across the center aisle. Ten, a beefy, florid Texan, was a veteran of asteroid mining, returning for his 10th tour. In fact, every one of the crew signed on with the Mad Astra had at least 4 previous tours with the mining ship. Everyone except himself and Arcadius Geiger. And Cady looked like he was falling asleep. Show off. Ivan and his fellow crew members sat together, taking up 2 complete rows. He could see groups from several other ships, all wearing similar utility coveralls, also heading up in preparation for a 6-month mining tour. The coveralls, standard issue items probably made by a single company, were identical, except for the ship insignia on the left breast. The Mad Astra crew wore a stylized image of a hand reaching for a star. Several clunks and a shudder ran through the shuttle, and Ivan renewed his death grip. He half expected to hear a squeal of bending metal from the chair's arms. A faint whiff of flop sweat assaulted his nostrils, and he realized he was again losing the battle with panic.
15 seconds,
the PA intoned. Ivan closed his eyes and tried deep breathing exercises again. Too late to back out now. Even if he unbuckled and ran screaming for the exit, the shuttle would launch on schedule with him plastered to the rear bulkhead. 3 months of training and simulations, which had felt like an adventure of its own, now seemed nothing more than wishful thinking. He was about to be shot into the air in a tin can with no say in his fate. Not even a view of space for the next 15 minutes.
"Relax, noob," said Davies. "We haven't lost a crew member in weeks."
The veteran miner grinned at Ivan, but the expression didn't reach his eyes. He looked more like a cat anticipating a meal than someone offering reassurance. Ivan opened his mouth to retort, but at that moment the sling kicked in. His body was pressed into his seat as the shuttle accelerated down the track. It would continue for the entire 5-kilometer stretch of the launch tunnel, air resistance reduced by massive pumps that pulled the air from in front of the shuttle and pumped it back in behind. The occasional moan floating up the aisle showed that he wasn't the only person having trouble. He tried to extract a small kernel of solace from that shared misery. Thankfully, this part of the takeoff was smooth. Nothing like the old space launches, perched on top of an explosive cylinder of fuel, being rattled so hard you felt your teeth would fall out through your ears. Ivan concentrated on his breathing and on not whimpering in fear. He hadn't been tagged with a nickname yet, and he sure as hell didn't want to provide the crew with that kind of material to work with. Certainly not before he'd even left atmosphere.
Does that sound interesting? It should, because getting into space was only the beginning. Ivan is prepared for hard work and loneliness, but not the unthinkable. After coming into contact with a mysterious alien substance, Pritchard finds an unwelcome entity sharing his mind and a disturbing physical transformation taking place. With his very humanity at stake, Pritchard must save mankind from full-scale interstellar war. The storyline is incredible. The author, Dennis E. Taylor, describes himself as a computer programmer by day, writer by night, and a snowboarder in season. With the phenomenal success of The Singularity Trap, he now devotes himself full-time to writing science fiction. Now, you can have his book today. Here's what Audible has set up for us. Audible is offering a free audiobook and 30 days to give you the opportunity to check out their service. To download your free audiobook, go to audibletrial.com/Ron's Amazing Stories. Again, that's audibletrial.com/Ron's Amazing Stories, and you too can get your copy of The Singularity Trap today. Thank you, Audible.
Not so many years ago, tomato soup and cream of tomato were unusual dishes, enjoyed very much, but not very often. Today, of all the soups in the world, tomato soup is the one most often served. Not because women have taken to making tomato soup frequently. No, on the contrary, few housewives ever attempt it anymore. There's just one reason for tomato soup's popularity, and it is this: the magic, matchless flavor of Campbell's tomato soup. There's a lively verve, a dashing zest about this flavor that people take to at once and come back to and enjoy again and again. The first racy taste of it has a way of arousing a desire to eat, and yet there's a pleasant feeling of satisfaction when the last spoonful is gone. So this soup is a happy choice for the main dish at lunchtime or at supper, and it also is a fine way to start the day's main meal. Serve it sometimes, too, as cream of tomato, made with milk instead of water. You can always be sure that it will be received with pleasure, because this, of all soups, is the one people like to have most often, Campbell's tomato soup.
Yes, it is Our Amazing Stories. But just what does that mean? We have segments for your stories, one for strange moments in history, and even one that plays clips from the golden age of radio to take us back in time. So what makes this segment different? Our Amazing Stories looks at people who did amazing things. So sit back and listen to this incredible tale. It is Our Amazing Stories. When James Harrison was 14 years old, he got really sick. One of his lungs had to be removed, and he needed a lot of blood. I was in the hospital for 3 months and had 100 stitches, he recalls. After receiving 13 units, almost 2 gallons of donated blood, Harrison knew right away that he wanted to give back. I was always looking forward to donating right from the operation because I didn't know how many people it took to save my life. I never met them, didn't know them. So when he turned 18, Harrison started giving blood and plasma regularly, every 3 weeks or so for 11 years. Meanwhile, doctors were struggling with cases of a potentially fatal condition called RH incompatibility, also known as rhesus isoimmunization or RH disease. It occurs when a pregnant woman has an Rh negative blood type, but the fetus she's carrying is Rh positive. In some pregnant women, Rh disease causes their antibodies to attack the fetus's red blood cells. Scientists needed a way to turn this reaction off, and in Harrison's blood, they found it. A rare antibody known as Rhd immune globulin, or anti-D. Doctors found that Harrison had anti-D because of the blood he received at age 14. And so Harrison became the first anti-D donor in Australia, and the most prolific. He's in the Guinness Book of World Records and is known at home as the man with the golden arm. I was prepared and wanted to give something back, and I've been donating for over 60 years. At this point, he has donated enough to save an estimated 2 million babies, including his own grandson, Scott. And in 2011, when Scott turned 16, he made his first donation sitting right next to his grandfather, who was making his 1,000th. Harrison is now 87 years old, and at 81, he had to hang up the tubes and needles and retire from donation. Those are the rules. What does he say about that? Others need to step up, he says. If you're healthy, why not? Well, that's it for this edition of Our Amazing Stories. I hope you enjoyed it. If you have any ideas for stories for this segment or want to write one of your own, please let me know. I'd love to work with you on the project and want to hear any ideas that you might have. Just use the contact page on the website and we'll get it done. Thank you for listening to Our Amazing Stories.
So now Toby Reed with a word to something that is really a matter of life and death. And that is, Toby?
A blowout, Walter. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, a blowout in one of the tires on your automobile. Did you ever stop to think that if you're driving at today's top speed of 35 miles an hour and a blowout swerves your car into an oncoming truck, which travels at the same speed, the resulting crash has a force of 70 miles an hour? Now, that's enough to double you right over the steering wheel and push the engine through the dash. Yet there is actually no need for a blowout to throw your car out of control, not if the car is equipped with Goodyear Lifeguards. For the Lifeguard is an inner tire, a two-ply safety tire within a tube. It replaces the conventional inner tube, and if your outer tire and tube blow, the inner tire of the Lifeguard remains inflated, holds the car steady so you can come to a sure, safe stop. That's the kind of blowout protection your family needs, and such sure protection it is that never once has a Lifeguard been reported to fail. Never once. Think it over. Ask your Goodyear dealer if he has any of the few Lifeguards now available. If so, equip your car with Lifeguards, which are now ration-free. For remember, when your tire blows out, the Goodyear Lifeguard never lets you down.
Our featured story comes from the pulp magazine Fantastic Universe, September issue, 1957. It was science fiction based and began publishing in June of 1953 to March of 1960. It was part of the explosion of science fiction magazine publishing in the 1950s and was moderately successful, outlasting almost all of its competitors. Our story today plays on the Ray Bradbury theme of the Martian Chronicles, but with a twist. Earth has unfortunately still been destroyed and is looking to find solace on Mars. But do they find it here, or is the music too much for them? The tale is called I Like Martian Music, and it was written by Charles E. Fritch. I hope you enjoy it.
I Like Martian Music by Charles E. Fritch. Longtree sat before his hole in the ground and gazed thoughtfully among the sandy red hills that surrounded him. His skin at the moment was a medium yellow, a shade between pride and happiness at having his brief symphony almost completed, with just a faint tinge of red to denote that uncertain, cautious approach to the last note which had eluded him thus far. He sat there unmoving for a while, and then he picked up his blowstring and fitted the mouthpiece between his thin lips. He blew into it softly, and at the same time gently strummed the 3 strings stretching the length of the instrument. The note was a firm, clear one which would have made any other musician proud. But Longtree frowned, and at the disappointment his body flushed a dark green and began taking on a purple cast of anger. Hastily he put down the blowstring and tried to think of something else. Slowly his normal color returned. Across the nearest hill came his friend Channeljumper, striding on the long, thin, ungainly legs that had given him his name. His skin radiated a blissful orange. "Longtree!" Channeljumper exclaimed enthusiastically, collapsing on the ground nearby and folding his legs around him. "How's the symphony coming?" "Not so good," Longtree admitted sadly, and his skin turned green at the memory. "If I don't get that last note, I may be this color the rest of my life." "Why don't you play what you've written so far? It's not very long, and it might cheer you up a bit." "You're a good friend, Channeljumper," Longtree thought, "and when Red Sand and I are married after the music festival, we'll have you over to our hole for dinner." As he thought this, he felt his body take on an orange cast, and he felt better. "I can't seem to get that last note," he said, picking up the blowstring again and putting it into position. "The final note must be conclusive, something complete in itself, and yet be able to sum up the entire meaning of the symphony preceding it." Channeljumper hummed sympathetically. "That's a big job for one note. It might be a sound no one has ever heard before." Longtree shrugged. "It may even sound alien," he admitted, "but it's got to be the right note." "Play, and we'll see," Channeljumper urged. Longtree played. And as he played, his features relaxed into a gentle smile of happiness, and his body turned orange. Delicately he strummed the 3 strings of the blowstring with his long-nailed fingers. Softly he pursed his frail lips and blew expertly into the mouthpiece. From the instrument came sounds the like of which Channeljumper had never before heard. The Martian sat and listened in evident rapture, his body radiating a golden glow of ecstasy. He sat and dreamed, and as the music played, his spine tingled with growing excitement. The music swelled, surrounding him, permeating him, picking him up in a great hand and sweeping him into new and strange and beautiful worlds. Worlds of tall metal structures, of vast stretches of greenness and of water and of trees and of small, pale creatures that flew giant metal insects. He dreamed of these things which his planet Mars had not known for millions of years. After a while the music stopped, but for a moment neither of them said anything. At last Channeljumper sighed. "It's beautiful," he said. "Yes," Longtree admitted. "But," Channeljumper seemed puzzled, "but somehow it doesn't seem complete. Almost, but not quite. As though... Longtree sighed. "One more note would do it?" "One more note. No more, no less. At the end of the crescendo. Could tie the symphony together and end it. But which one? I've tried them all, and none of them fit." His voice had risen higher in his excitement, and Channeljumper warned. "Careful. You're beginning to turn purple." "I know," Longtree said mournfully, and the purple tint changed to a more acceptable green. "But I've got to win first prize at the festival tomorrow. Red Sand promised to marry me if I did." "You can't lose," Channeljumper told him, and then remembered. "If you can get that last note." "If," Longtree echoed despairingly, as though his friend had asked the impossible. "I wish I had your confidence, Chan. You're orange most of the time, while I'm a spectrum." "I haven't your artistic temperament," Channeljumper told him. "Besides, orange is such a homely color, I feel ashamed to have it all the time." As he said this, he turned green with shame, and Longtree laughed at the paradox. Channeljumper laughed too, glad that he had diverted his friend's attention from the elusive and perhaps non-existent note. "Did you know the space rocket is due pretty soon?" he said. "Perhaps even in time for the music festival." "Space rocket? Oh, I forgot. You were busy composing and didn't get to hear it," Channeljumper said. "Well, Big Wind, who has a telescope in his hole, told me a rocket is coming through space towards us, possibly from the third planet." "Oh?" Longtree said, not particularly interested. "I wonder if they'll look like us," Channeljumper wondered. "If they're intelligent, of course they will," Longtree said, certainly not caring. "Their culture will probably be alien, though, and their music—" He paused and turned a very deep yellow. "Of course! They might even be able to furnish the note I need to complete my symphony." Channeljumper shook his head. "You've got to compose it all yourself," he reminded, "or you don't qualify. And if you don't qualify, you can't win. And if you don't win, you can't marry Red Sand." "But just one little note," Longtree said. Channeljumper shrugged helplessly and turned sympathetically green. "I don't make the rules," he said. "No. Well," Longtree went on in sudden determination, "I'll find that last note if I have to stay permanently purple." Channeljumper shuddered jestingly at this, but remained pleasantly orange. "And I'll leave you alone so you can get to work," he said, unfolding himself. "Goodbye," Longtree said, but Channeljumper's long legs had already taken him over to the nearest sand dune and out of sight. Alone, Longtree picked up the blowstring once more, placed it against his stomach, and gave out with a clear, beautiful experimental note which was, again, not the one he desired. He still had not found it an hour later when the sound came. The sound was a low, unpleasant rumble, a sound lower than any Longtree had ever heard, and he wondered what it was. Thinking of it, he remembered he had seen a large flash of fire in the sky a moment before the roar came, but since this last was clearly not likely at all, he dismissed the whole thing as imagination and tried again to coax some new note from the blowstring. A half hour later, Channeljumper came bounding excitedly over a sand dune. "They're here!" he cried, screeching to a halt and emitting yellow flashes of color. "Who's here?" Longtree demanded, turning violet in annoyance at the interruption. "The visitors from space," Channeljumper explained. "They landed near my hole. They're little creatures, only half as big as we are, but thicker and gray-colored." "Gray-colored?" Longtree repeated incredulously, trying to picture the improbability. "But only on the outside," Channeljumper went on. "They have an outside shell that comes off, and inside they're sort of pink, orange." "Aha," Longtree said, as though he'd suspected it all the time. "Evidently they wear gray suits of some kind, probably for protection." "They took them off anyway," Channeljumper said, eager to impart his knowledge, "and they were sort of pink-orange underneath. There are only 2 of them, and one has long hair." Strange, Longtree mused, thinking of their own hairless bodies. Wonder what they want. Channeljumper shrugged to indicate he didn't know. "The short-haired one followed me," he said. Longtree felt the chill blue of fear creep along his spine, but immediate anger at himself changed it conveniently to purple, and he was certain Channeljumper hadn't noticed. When he had controlled himself, he said, "Well, it doesn't matter. I've got to get on with my symphony. That last note." "He's here," Channeljumper announced. "What?" Channeljumper pointed eagerly, and Longtree's eyes followed the direction to where the alien stood at the top of a nearby dune, staring at them. Longtree could feel his skin automatically turning red with caution, blending with the sand, while the ever-trusting Channeljumper remained bright orange. "Good gosh," the alien exclaimed. "Not only do they look like modified grasshoppers, they change color, too." "What did he say?" Longtree demanded. "How should I know?" Channeljumper said. "It's in another language." "And its voice," Longtree exclaimed, almost disbelieving it. "Low. Lower than even our drums rumble. And they talk in squeaks yet," the alien told himself aloud. Longtree regarded the alien carefully. As Channeljumper had said, the creature was short and had close-cropped hair on its head. The legs were brief and pudgy, and Longtree felt a shade of pity for the creature who could obviously not get around as well as they. It was undoubtedly intelligent, the space rocket testified to that, and the fact that the creature's skin color stayed a peaceful pink-orange helped assure Longtree the alien's mission was friendly. The alien raised a short arm and stepped slowly forward. "I come in peace," he said in the language they could not understand. "My wife and I are probably the only humans left alive. When we left Earth, most of the population had been wiped out by atomics. I think we were the only ones to get away." Longtree felt his redness subside to orange as he wondered idly what the alien had said. Except for a natural curiosity, he didn't really care, for he remembered suddenly the symphony he had to finish by tomorrow if he were to marry Redsand. But there was the element of politeness to consider, so he nudged Channeljumper. "Don't just stand there. Say something." Channeljumper flustered and turned several colors in rapid succession. He stammered, "Welcome to our planet, O visitor from space," and motioned the alien to sit down. "That's not very creative," Longtree accused. "What's the difference," Channeljumper pointed out, "when he doesn't understand us anyway?" "You guys don't really look like grasshoppers," the man from Earth apologized, coming forward. "It's just the long legs that fooled me from up there. Boy, am I glad to find somebody intelligent on Mars. From the air we couldn't see any cities or anything, and we were afraid the planet didn't have any life. I wish we could understand each other, though." Longtree smiled pleasantly and wished the creature would go away so he could search for the last note to his symphony. He picked up his blowstring so the alien wouldn't sit on it. "Play for him," Channeljumper suggested, seating himself by segments. "Just the last part to see how he reacts. Music is universal, you know." Longtree was going to do just that thing, for despite Channeljumper's warning that he might compose every single note by himself, he felt an alien viewpoint might be helpful. He started playing. Channeljumper sat dreaming, glowing radiantly, but the alien seemed somewhat perturbed by the music and fidgeted nervously. Could it be, Longtree wondered, that the incredible beauty of his composition might not translate acceptably to alien ears? He dismissed the thought as unlikely. That's a bit high, isn't it?" the creature said, shaking his head. Lost in the sweeping melodies, neither Longtree nor Channeljumper paid any attention to the meaningless syllables. Longtree played on, oblivious to all else, soaring toward the great screaming crescendo that would culminate with the missing note. Vaguely he became aware that the creature had gotten up, and he turned a small part of his attention to the action. Longtree smiled inwardly, pleased, and turned yellow with pride to think that even a man from another planet should so appreciate his symphony that he got up and danced a strange little dance and even sang to the music. The alien held on to his ears and leaped erratically, singing, "No, no, stop, it's too high, my head's bursting." Channeljumper, too, seemed pleased by this show of appreciation, though neither of them understood the words, and Longtree swept into the final notes of the rising crescendo with a gusto he had not previously displayed. He stopped where he had always stopped, and the final note came. It startled the Martians. Then the realization swept over them in glad tides of color. The symphony was complete now. With that final alien sound, Longtree could win both the festival prize and Redsand with it. The last note was a soft popping sound that had come from the creature from another planet. They looked to see him sagging to the ground, his head soft and pulpy. "My symphony's complete!" Longtree exclaimed jubilantly, a brilliant yellow now. But Channeljumper's yellow happiness was tinged with green. "A pity," he said. "The creature had to give its life in exchange for the note." "I believe it really wanted to," Longtree said, turning solemn. "Did you see how it danced to the music, as though in the throes of ecstasy? And it didn't change color once. It must have died happy to know it gave itself to a good cause." "You could probably get by with claiming to use the creature as an auxiliary instrument," mused Channeljumper, practical once more, "and eliminate any claim that he might have assisted you. But what about the festival? This one looks as though he doesn't have another note in him." "There's the other one," Longtree reminded, "the one with long hair. We can save that one until tomorrow." "Of course," Channeljumper agreed, standing up. "I'll go get it, and you can keep it safe here in your hole until tomorrow night." "You're a good friend, Channeljumper," Longtree began, but the other was already bounding out of sight over a sand dune. Blissfully he raised the blowstring into position and played the opening notes to his symphony. The alien lay unmoving with its head in a sticky puddle, but Longtree took no notice. He didn't even consider that after the festival he would never be able to play his symphony again in all its glorious completeness. His spinal column tingled pleasantly, and his skin turned the golden yellow of unbearable happiness. The music was beautiful.
Now that was an interesting story. If you caught my reference to the Martian Chronicles theme, you get it. Except in this version, the Earth folks are the ones that, well, didn't fare very well. A true win for Martians everywhere. Our story was written by Charles E. Fritch, who was an author and editor of fantasy, science fiction, horror, and mystery fiction. He was the editor of the Mike Shane Mystery Magazine from 1979 until 1985. One of his stories, Misfortune Cookie, was adapted for an episode of the television series The Twilight Zone. But not the 1950s Rod Steiger hosted version. Nope, this was from the 1980s remake of the series and was all about an ill-fated food critic. You can check it out on YouTube if you want to.
Mr. Clean gets rid of dirt and grime and grease in just a minute.
Mr. Clean will clean your whole house and everything that's in it.
Floors, doors, walls, halls, white sidewall tires and old golf balls.
Sinks, stoves, bathtubs he'll do. He'll even help clean laundry too.
Mr. Clean gets rid of dirt and grime and grease in just a minute.
Mr. Clean will clean your whole house and everything that's in it.
Can he clean a kitchen sink?
Quicker than a wink.
Can he clean a window sash?
Faster than a flash.
Can he clean a dirty mirror?
He'll make it bright and clear.
Can he clean a diamond ring?
Mr. Clean cleans anything.
Mr. Clean gets rid of dirt and grime and grease in just a minute. Mr. Clean will clean your whole house and everything that's in it. Mr. Clean, Mr. Clean, Mr. Clean.
These are your stories, sent by you, for you.
Well, now that you've heard These Are Your Stories Special Edition, are you ready for more of your stories? All of the tales we have for today come from Canada. Our first story comes from the Providence, Nova Scotia. It was sent in via the website by Brianna Bastian, and she has titled her story, Please Don't Take the Toy. There is a place in Nova Scotia known locally as the Little Girl's Grave. It is the gravestone of a young girl named Catherine McIntosh. She died April 23, 1882, and was 1 month shy of her 9th birthday. When she passed away, she was originally buried in McLenna Cemetery. However, due to a dispute with a neighbor, her body was dug up and moved to the side of Granville Road in front of the family farm. It is said that the site is extremely haunted. One night I went with 2 friends to visit the gravestone. It was dark and gloomy. Driving down the eerie, winding dirt road, we came upon the location. We brought a toy to leave at the gravestone. The local lore surrounding this site says to leave a toy for her, but never take a toy away. We stayed for a while and nothing happened. We left a toy top and thanked her for allowing us to visit. It wasn't until we left we began having paranormal experiences. We noticed on the front windshield, in the condensation, a small child's footprint on the glass. It was so detailed that you could see the ridges of the toes. It scared us quite a bit, to say the least. A few days after we had visited the site, I went back with my sister to give it a second go. After the first experience, it was clear that there was some truth to the tales. We arrived about the same time as the last time. The toy top was gone, and I asked Catherine, the ghost, who had taken the toy away. It was then we both heard something truly bizarre. It was the sound of a child laughing, very faintly. We both stared at each other in disbelief. We had no idea from where the sound originated, and there was no one around except for the two of us. This went on for about 5 minutes, and then, out of nowhere, the toy top dropped at our feet. This is my one and only paranormal experience that I've encountered in my life. If anyone hears this and has had similar experiences at this gravestone, please share it with this community. Thank you for reading my story, Ron, and may all the Ron's Amazing Stories followers have a good day. Brianna Bastion, Nova Scotia. Well, thank you for your story. That one is a real head-scratcher. I hope everyone takes your advice and shares a story. That would make my day. Here is a short creepy tale from Olivia, who lives somewhere in Canada. She didn't want to share any more than that. Her story is titled, The Child Speaks. We were staying at a campground near Summerside, Prince Edward Island in Canada. Nothing too expensive, a generic kind of place. Anyway, on our last night, my husband and I were in the tent and we started hearing rocks or sticks crunching. I turned on a flashlight and we both see a small boy's silhouette. My husband and I saw the exact same thing and we both felt chills go through our bodies. I meekly said, "Hello?" A creepy voice responded, "Help me." We both freaked out and jumped out of the tent, but there was no one around for 500 feet in all directions. We were like one of 4 sites right by a corn farm. We walked around the area and found no kids or anything living for that matter. The next morning we talked to a few neighbors. None of them heard anything or had any kids with them. We still talk about that today, and that was like 23 years ago. We were so amazed. Olivia from somewhere in Canada. Okay, that one is short and quite creepy. I did some research on the area and I didn't come up with any stories that matched. However, I did find that the city is known for a rich history of shipbuilding since the 1800s. Also, there have been a large number of black-eyed kids sightings in the city of Summerside. Could it have been a BEK? I hope not. Our last story comes from Brenda Brown, who writes in from Montreal, Canada. She has titled her story, "Don't Open That Door." Here's a little background. So this past Thanksgiving was hard for my family. It was the first one without my grandmother, who we called Nana. My grandfather hosted this year, and we call him Nane. So on Thanksgiving night, me and Nane and my half-brother were sitting in the living room reminiscing about past holidays we had spent with Nana. we heard something fall in the master bedroom. Nanae had closed the door to keep the dogs out of there, so we knew there shouldn't be anything in there. We brushed it off and decided to put on a movie, and were watching it when we started hearing voices coming from the room. We paused the film to listen, but couldn't make out what they were saying. We assumed it was just the neighbors, and were about to continue the movie when we heard a voice call out for Nanae in my Nana's voice. We all knew that voice all too well. We looked at each other, quite stunned. Again she called out. This time her tone was urgent, like she was hurting. "Help me," we heard her cry. My older brother was shaking. He got up and started for the door when Nanae shouted, "Don't open that door!" Again we heard my Nana crying while pounding on the door. Then, at 11:52 p.m. exactly, it went quiet. We sat in silence for a long time when my Nanae finally said, "That was the time she died." We hadn't spoken about what happened since, and Nanae had me sage the entire house the next day. Brenda Brown, Montreal, Canada. Well, what a story. So very creepy and downright scary. I'm not sure I'd even want to stay in the house after that. Thank you for sharing your story, Brenda, I think. Well, that's it for this time. If you have a story that you want to share, like Brenda did, head to the main website at ronsamazingstories.com, click on the story submission banner, leave your story, give it a title, and please tell me where you're from. I'll read it if I can.
Snap, what a happy sound. Snap is the happiest sound I've found. You may clap, rap, tap, slap, but snap makes the world go round. Snap, crackle, pop, Rice Krispies. I say it's crackle, the crispy sound. You gotta have crackle or the clock's not wound. Geese cackle, feathers tickle, bells buckle, beats pickle, but crackle makes the world go round. Snap, crackle, pop, Rice Krispies. I insist that pop's the sound. The best is missed unless pop's around. You can't stop hopping, the cereal's popping. Pop makes the world go round. Snap, crackle, pop, Rice Krispies. Let's go for Kellogg's Rice Krispies. Snap, it's crackle, what a happy sound. You gotta have the crackle or the clock's not bound. You can't stop hopping and the cereal's popping. Snap, crackle, pop makes the world go round.
That was episode number 575, and these were our storytellers. Orrin Williams, Brianna Bastian, Olivia from somewhere in Canada, and Brenda Brown. Thank you for sharing your stories. If you want to follow the podcast or the blog, head to ronsamazingstories.com. There you will find any of the links I mentioned and how to contact us. Do you want to help the show? The best thing you can do is to tell your friends all about it, and please leave reviews or feedback wherever you listen. Clicking that follow or like button helps us grow. Thank you for listening, and I hope you come again to find out what are Ron's Amazing Stories.
All of the vintage audio used in the podcast is believed to be in the public domain. Ron's Amazing Stories does not own the rights to any of the old-time radio used here. If you hold the rights to any of the shows played, please contact us immediately at ronsamazingstories.com.